Why struggle through a post-merger integration when you can glide through it? Why deal with the PMI integration challenges when you can overcome them even before they occur? Why move slow when you can move at pace? What are the world's leading PMI experts doing right now to achieve profit-accelerating integrations? This podcast will give you all the answers to these questions and many more. My name is Dudley Peacock, and welcome to the 100 Days and Beyond podcast.
Hello and welcome, David, to 100 Days and Beyond podcast. Great to see you today. How are you? Good?
All good, thanks, Dudley. Very nice to meet you. Yeah, all good.
I'm sure the audience will absolutely love what you got to share and so on. And I want to maybe just start this podcast slightly differently, and because I normally do a quick intro, but I think from your background and from where you come, I maybe give us your intro, and then I'm going to go back into your LinkedIn profile, and I'm going to then sort of pick out a few of the key things I think. But essentially, you're managing partner at an M&A Advisory, and I'm then going to leave it there. And I'm going to say, tell us a bit more about where you're at right now, and how did you get into it?
Certainly. So yes, we're a managing partner of, as the name suggests on the tin, we're an M&A advisory firm. We are based in central London, just outside St. Catherine's Dock. And about us, so we are a sector-specific M&A firm. So we deal in the marketing, communications, and MarTech sectors. And which essentially we have a people heritage. So we have a lot of the businesses we sell have a serious people component to them. So we have a particular way of doing our deals, which I'll come on to a bit later. And we're size and geography agnostic. So we cover many sizes of deal in that sector. So probably anything from an EBITDA from £300,000 all the way through to about £3 million. And as I say, we're size agnostic and geography agnostic. And so we work all over the world for various businesses. About 90% is on the sell side because that's where we feel we can add the most value. And 10% is we work for buyers. Usually it's a very specific brief, maybe for buyers who haven't worked before, who haven't bought before.
Yeah, so I think that makes it incredibly interesting, David. And I think from a slightly different type of guest that we normally have, we often have M&A post-merger or post-integration practitioners that focus a lot more of their time and energy on that end. What's really interesting, and two key things sort of come to mind when I listen to you, and after we had a chat yesterday as well. Two key things. One is you help a lot of sell side businesses, and the other aspect, and I think that probably complicates life a little bit more, is the fact that these are people-based businesses.
Yeah.
And we're not looking at machinery, equipment. We're not looking at any of those type of things. And often people-based businesses have got a lot to do with talent management. I mean, that's the new word people use, or the word people use around what people are in terms of bringing on talent, because talent makes a difference between a business that works and one that doesn't. And often businesses based on people are often very difficult to systemize because you have to rely so heavily on the talent within the business. Mm-hmm. Now you go in on a sell side, you try to value it, and you try to think about what happens post acquisition, what happens to the deal, what happens to the people, the entity, and then because you sell side and you're doing deal closing and so on. Tell us a little bit about that dynamic around people-based businesses, but also probably focusing on the sell side dynamic in terms of what you look at, because you're pitching businesses essentially. I mean, you're selling businesses. So the buyers are going to be asking questions such as, tell me more about what makes that business valuable, and the people, will they stay? I suppose those are some of the key questions. So tell us a bit more about that dynamic.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, the marketing comms is a very interesting industry in that generally it's a business that is the owners of comms businesses are very passionate about their businesses, and it's not a business that's easily handed over to their children because it's a very full on type of industry. So generally, the sellers are ultimately looking to sell. And also, you've got a whole myriad of buyers out there that are looking to buy businesses because other marketing communications businesses are looking to add a new skill set or a new geography or a new top technology onto their business uh, in order to wrap themselves more closely around their clients. So there's a sort of a lot of supply and demand in some ways for this sort of industry. Um, and I guess the buyers, what they're looking for, as well as looking for a skill set that suits their business. And in many ways, buyers' strategy in this industry is driven by opportunity.
Mm.
You know, a buyer we present an interesting opportunity to a buyer, and they may not have thought about doing this as part of their strategy, but they think actually this could be a worthwhile acquisition. This would make a difference to our lives, our clients' lives. So that's generally the dynamic. And what they'll then be looking for is to say, great, that's the skill set we want, but how robust is this business? So they'll look at things perhaps very similar to things they look in perhaps a more normal business, such as have they got a second tier management team? Do they have too much reliance on one client? Have they got strong systems and procedures in place? And are they making sufficient profit margins? And have they done that on a consistent basis? And have their clients stayed with them for a number of years? Do they have that sort of track record with their clients? So they look at all those things to determine the robustness of the business.
Yeah, and if I if I think, I mean, if I look at your profile, very interesting. You're a fellow of the Association of Certified Accountants or Chartered Certified Accountants,
Yeah.
the FCCA, as well as the Chartered Institute of Marketing. I mean, that is probably two polar opposites.
Yeah. Complete schizophrenic. Yeah. uh, Yeah, I mean, how that started. I mean, I think when I started quite a long time ago in business, on leaving school, I wanted to work in business. That was my ambition. And I think it was my father suggested to me that, oh, a lot of the people that run business these days are the accountants. So that got me interested in becoming an accountant. Now, I'm not sure that I was an out and out accountant. Naturally, I was very interested in the wider business subject, not just accounting. So as my career developed, I joined a large industrial company on their training scheme and qualified as an accountant. And as my career developed, I felt that I was lacking in marketing skills. And in those days, MBAs were just starting to come out where they're a more generous qualification. But as I had a pretty good financial background, I just added on the marketing. And one of the jobs that I had a lot of international jobs. And one of the jobs I was also responsible, I had more of a commercial role, responsible for the marketing, customer service, and those sorts of things, as well as the numbers. So that's how that happened.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. And then you get involved in a people business, which is, again, I would say a third layer. Although they are marketing sort of agencies of the MarTech environment, you're dealing a lot with people and the way people think and all the behavioral psychology, if you like, which again is again not maybe part of the formal education, but part of probably real life and going through the normal, I would say, the learning curves we go through as we build our careers. If I come back then to the kind of companies and so on, you talk about cultural and business fit to maximize value, sort of marketing, communications, digital, and martech sectors, and
Mm.
and yeah. So you, part of the things that you were saying were when businesses are being sold or bought, and you think about the questions that the buyers ask, and that often they say, "Oh, that's a great idea to bring in maybe a marketing business into our business to further grow our teams and so on." So the acquisitions appear to be, and the integrations appear to be sometimes around bringing in, buying in the talent, and maybe sometimes customers. I mean, if that's their business, so they're already a MarTech business and they're adding on to that, but maybe buying in the talent as opposed to buying in a customer base and so on. Tell us
Yeah.
if that's the kind of thing that happens from time to time.
Yes, I mean, that's very much the case, particularly with some of the smaller deals where, as I say, I think buyers are always looking out for a new skill set, a new technology, or a new geography in order to wrap themselves more closely to their own clients. And um, so they may well buy perhaps a smaller business that does data, or it might do digital if they're a PR consultancy, for example, or um, more of an integrated marketing business. If depending on their own skill sets, they'll find something complementary. So absolutely. But the nice thing about buying those skill sets with buying a smaller agency is that that agency will have its own revenue stream and have its own clients, because the only way you can really prove that skill set, the quality of that skill set, is to have a demonstrate that you've got good financial income derived from that skill set through clients. So yeah, so they're often complete businesses. You're not just buying the skill set in terms of what you're valuing and buying, but essentially what the buyer then can do is take that skill set and leverage it to its own clients and really up the revenue.
Yeah, I think there's a trend, and maybe you can confirm or not confirm. There's a trend in trying to get hold of businesses, buy entities that have got recurring revenues. And obviously, if there's a tech component to it, and there's a contract involved, or a service level agreement, or the kind of technology that this MarTech or these agencies and that, if they sell that as part of their service pack or service stack, if you like, um, how much does I mean, if you look, and I suppose it comes from the valuation side of things. If I'm looking at a business like a people business is only as good as the current contract that they're busy servicing. If they've got a large number of recurring customers that are buying from them regularly, and they're on sort of let's call it maintenance based contracts or arrangements, as opposed to these one-off projects. And
Yeah.
often people businesses are one-off project based, so their incomes sort of the feast and famine, if you like. They might have a great project, do incredibly well, and then drop.
Yeah.
Then it's all about how good are they at marketing themselves, because if they're not selling their own projects and their own client relationships, it doesn't matter how good they are at delivering marketing, how good are they at generating new work. And just tell us a bit about that dynamic. So when a buyer comes in and says, look, we would like to bring in this entity. It's not just past financials. I'm sure it's got a lot to do with the makeup of a people-based business. Tell us
Yes, absolutely. I mean, the buyer will be very, very interested. And as I say, they will look at the skill set that's offered and then try and understand the quality of the revenue stream. So if they've got, a client, perhaps more than 25% of the revenue, that's becomes a little bit more risky to them. So the value might be affected by that. So if you're a seller of a business, it's best to try and keep the number of your clients, to have a fairly equal spread, for a number of reasons. When you sell, but also when you're an ongoing business, if you lose a very chunky client, it's going to affect your business. You might be facing the situation of having to lay off staff or making losses for a while. So that's really important. So buyers will definitely look at the quality of that revenue stream, whether it's, and also sometimes retained clients maybe have a little bit of a premium but what they will look at is they'll go back several years to see how long that agency has kept its clients for, which is probably more important than written contracts. So if they've worked with a business for 3 or 4 years, there's chances are they'll be working with them in future for another 3 or 4.
Yeah, and if you put your if you put your accounting hat on, if often when I see the financials of service based businesses, or let's say people based businesses, the 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 difficulty for them is to do a proper gross margin on their on their P&L, on their income statement or profit and loss, and because many of the times the people inside the entity sit below the GP line, so then they
Yeah.
end up having very, very high gross margins.
Yeah.
So, and they're sitting at 80% or something like that. And that's not realistic because it's a people-based business. I mean,
Yeah.
using your, and this is, I said, I'm going to throw a curveball in, and maybe I think this is it, David, but
Mhm.
if you are busy advising a people-based business, I've seen so many of them, salaries and people expenses sit below the GP line, and I don't know, maybe something small like, I don't know, office supplies, I don't know, whatever sits above,
Yeah.
and they sit these massive margins, say, oh, but this is a high margin business, and in fact it's not.
Yeah.
The difficulty is, how do you differentiate between internal functions of people performing internal functions and people performing client-based functions, which is actually a cost of sale? So now, I mean,
Um,
just
yeah.
just tell us a bit about that. The kind of
Yeah,
conversation.
certainly. I mean, there's a the industry is probably growing up a little bit on that now, more than it was. And really, you could argue that the turnover is irrelevant. And what people look for in all marketing comms businesses is what's called fee income equivalent. So that is your turnover less your bought in costs. So if you're a media business, for example, that buys and sells media spots, and your margin between buying and selling is very small, your gross profit effective gross profit may be effectively only 5 or 10%. If you're a PR consultancy that sells time for a lot of the time, your fee income is going to be almost 100% of your turnover. But you can compare the two, so that the gross profit in a media company will be equivalent to the fee income in a PR consultancy. So you're comparing fee income equivalents all the time. And then what to do with people, the people cost. Well, yeah, you're absolutely right, Dudley. They do go as an overhead. And so the answer there really, and I think financial controls in the agency and consulting world have improved, tremendously over the years. So basically the way people control that is by saying that there should be a percentage of revenue or percentage of fee income equivalent that those overheads should represent, which is round about 50%. So you're saying, right, if I add all my staff costs up, I should, on a year-on-year basis, come in with about 50% of my fee income. And then you allow about 30% for other overheads. And then the remaining 20 versus fee income is your net margin. So instead of talking about turnover, it's all about fee income or gross profit now, and everything's in relation to that.
Yeah, it becomes quite difficult because then you start using almost a standard costing model, as opposed to you almost a rule of thumb, as in 50% should go there and 50% should sit over there, kind of thing. I think you.
It does generally follow that. Yeah, in broad terms, that's what we do. Yeah. exactly.
Yeah, just to have some kind of benchmark to start. I think
Yeah,
accounting firms is one third is staff, one third is overhead, and one third is profit for the partner, or something like that. I think they
yeah,
try to do a one third, one third, one third split. So I was just thinking about the professional services and the people based business. If it's a 50% split, so if I take my salary bill, 50% theoretically is for client work, 50% is for internal. Um, but it's not actually the case. But I'm sure it's horses for courses. When you go and actually look at the financials, you then try and unpick that. Tell us more, what that looks like.
yes. I mean, it's an interesting one. Generally, there's a number of things. Number one, agencies will normally, I think, unlike an accounting firm, slightly. I mean, an accounting firm, it has probably a slightly more monopolistic position with their clients, so they can, um, there's not almost a market rate for what they charge them. They can actually just cost it up to make sure that they're covered, as you said, a third, a third, a third. I think what in the marketing industry, it can be more, it's quite competitive. And what they will then do is individual client profitability for each client. So they will have timesheets and they'll measure the cost against the revenue from each client, and each one should be making a decent margin, and the company overall should be making about 20%. But there's often a little bit of a variation between how much you make on each client. One client might be making 25, another might be making only 15. And when they get too low, the agency has to make that difficult decision to say, should we be carrying on with this client?
Yeah, because I think sometimes margins can be squeezed in a highly competitive environment, and you end up selling your services for less and less, and obviously it's a diminishing return because now you can't again pay your people well, you can't do bonuses, that sort of thing. So
That's right.
now you're doing sell side. I think you said the bulk of your work, about 90% of your work.
Yes, about 90% of our work is sell side. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. That's where we add most of the value, because generally sellers of businesses are selling for the first time. That's the only time they sell their business. So you're able to transfer the skill sets that they need to sell it. Plus we've got, we do this all the time. We're sector specific. So we've got a very strong market knowledge of who the buyers are, and what they're potentially looking for. So that's,
Run us through that first conversation. So I pick up the phone and say, David, you know what? I've got a marketing or some agency, and I want to go to market. I'm tired. I just want to finish. I need to hand it off to someone else.
yeah.
What's the conversation? I mean, tell us a broad outline of some of those conversations.
Yeah, I mean, I think first of all, it's sometimes people ring me up and they say, when should I sell? And often the answer I give to them, because it's a people business, is when you want to sell. Because I think there's nothing worse when somebody is tired in a business and really does want to move on, that they're actually still trying to struggle away with their business. They'll lose that passion for it, which is so important. But if someone calls for the first time and wants to talk about their business, and we have many of these conversations at various stages of business life, and there's many reasons to sell. I mean, some people want to sell because, as you mentioned, they've got to pretty close to retirement age and they're thinking of winding down, or they're a younger business that what we say is looking to play on a bigger stage. And so they might need a particular skill set themselves, and they're unable to buy it. But, for instance, they've grown up quite quickly and they've started to win international clients. And one of their international clients says, look, I can give you a lot more business if you had a New York office and were part of someone bigger. So that's a kind of a reason to join someone bigger. So we have that conversation. And also we have a conversation around preparing their business for sale, looking at a number of factors. And we do a thing called a strategic review with them, which looks at their financial systems, which looks at their quality of their client relationships, the quality of the management team, all of these things. They're the ambitions of the people in the business, and to assess all of that and determine what needs to change to put them in the optimum position to sell, and also give them a timing on when they should sell. So so we do that for them, maybe a year, maybe 2 years, even more before they actually push the button on selling.
Yeah, so it's quite a process, and I'm imagining that the relationship that you build with the sellers over that time, as you get to know them pretty well. I'm guessing in this whole information gathering, getting them ready for sale, understanding the strategic outcomes they're looking for, etc. I'm sure you get quite close to a lot of your clients.
Yes, indeed. I mean, if we do one of these strategic reviews, which we do, as I say, a number of years before sale, we get to know their business quite well, and we're able to, that we sit down with the management team and understand what their personal aims and objectives are. So not only do we understand the foibles of the business, but also the foibles of the people in it. And we're often looking to, once we put our report out, we're aiming to correct a lot of the business issues there, so that it's, that anything that a buyer might be, sort of we're trying to emphasize the strengths and remove the weaknesses of the business, so that, that it will sell more easily and fit in with a buyer's business more easily.
Yeah, because you're the guy that's got to go out and answer all those uncomfortable questions. So you might as well address them, some of the issues that can be addressed, rather address them in advance, because when you get to negotiating on behalf, or at least presenting, you'd like a lot of those to be gone.
Yes, and usually you can get them to go. There's no question. The lovely thing about this industry is often addressing the issues can be quite a quick process. It could be, you could sort of turn a business around in a year. And the strategic review that we do for businesses, the interesting thing is you don't necessarily have to sell after we've done that review. It will make the business a stronger business anyway. I mean, we are mainly an executional M&A firm. We're not a consulting firm, but we do a small amount of consulting. And when we do that for people, generally they have a much more robust business for themselves at the end of that process.
So let's turn this now into you've got everything ready. Tell us about the first conversation or first few conversations. How do you frame? You've got all your homework done. You've done all the work you've done for a year or two. You're ready to take it to market. Tell us a bit about that process. What do you do? How do you get people interested? Once you're in front of them, what that conversation look like? And to get them all excited about what's potential. Give us a little bit about that background.
Yes. Well, once we've put all the information together, we obviously, we're out in the market all the time as a firm, and we speak with a huge number of buyers worldwide on a regular basis to get to understand the types of business they're looking for. We get to understand trends in the industry. And so we know a lot of people that might be interested in, or certainly would be interested in buying our client's business, but also that still leaves a lot of potential buyers on the table. So we always do quite a huge amount of bespoke research as well, targeting those people that, as well as people we know might be interested, those that we think might be interested. And we'll drop a line, or we'll call the CEOs of those businesses, and we'll send a executive summary of our client to them. And if they're interested, we get appropriate NDAs signed and tell them a little bit more about the business. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, you make it sound like it's easy, but I'm sure it's not an easy task to find the right, let's call it portfolio type of buyers. even though you're in the market. I'm sure that whole just making sure that you're in touch, getting in touch, opening up new conversations. You make it sound as if it's easy, but I've got my doubts. But I mean, tell us, is it easy?
I suppose if it was easy, Tesco would be doing it, but so it's probably not so easy. But we are pretty successful in the number of deals we put away. I think we have a very, very high percentage of deals that we finalise for our clients, and I think it's partly being specialist and regularly talking, being out in the marketplace helps. We have a particular process to ensure that the crucial elements in a deal, we find that there should be, I suppose, 3 crucial elements in any Marcoms deal has to be achieved, which also enables the client our client to make sure they get the best deal. And I'd say that those 3 elements, and those 3 elements really, I think you could probably apply to any business, but it's particularly been brought up in the people business area because it's so crucial. But I think there are a number of other non-people business acquisitions that could learn from it as well. And and those elements are you have to have chemistry between the parties. So on the first meeting, if you feel comfortable with the potential buyer, then that's certainly a good tick in the box, because that will help you. If you've got a good chemistry and a good rapport, the chances are when things get a little bit more difficult during perhaps the earn-out phase of the deal, you've got a good working relationship, potentially have a good working relationship with them. Whereas if you sit in a room with somebody for the first time and you just think, I really don't like this person, I don't think I can trust them, you'll probably be right. So it's best to avoid that. The second thing we look for is a cultural fit between the business. So a business culture, and companies can have a different, it could be a UK company buying in Japan, and a different national culture, but a business culture could be the same. And I think the best way of describing a business culture is the way we do things around here. And if the 2 businesses have a similar style of working, that once they start working on projects together post deal, they'll get each other and understand how they can work. If one company's, for example, very bureaucratic, the other's very entrepreneurial, they'll have problems post deal. So that's what we look for, is a sound cultural fit. And the final thing we look for is what's called an outstanding business proposition. So that if the 2 companies get together, there should be something that really drives value between the 2. So they should be very, there should be a number of synergies. So a bit like the example I gave, where one business is looking for a buyer with a US office, and the US office might be, having perhaps problems or something like that for the buyer. So therefore it will revitalize their US office and give the buyer just the same thing, a very strong US office potentially. And that's what you call an outstanding business proposition, really and truly. So if we have all of those elements, and the nice thing about that business proposition, it will enable, if there is any earn-out attached to the deal or incentive payments, it will help the seller get through those with ease. It will give them kind of a following wind, as it were, to get through those earn-out and maximise out on those earn-out payments.
Yeah, and I want us to touch on that earn-out element, but I want to just go one step back, because I'm just thinking, if I'm a buyer, let's say, and I'd like to look at an entity, and you give me a phone call, and it's like, okay, well, I'm David, I've got this kind of entity and so on. One of the things that come up in my mind is how do I know I can bring these people into my business? So if I had to have, let's say, I've never bought a business before, or I've never engaged with this type of advisory before.
Yeah.
What would be sort of the top 2 or 3, 4 questions that would be critical to give me that sort of comfort that I'm doing the right thing. From a buyer perspective, and in other words, what are the objections you get in that
Yeah.
space, and what are the, what's going on in my mind as a buyer when you are talking to me?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, we often do work for buyers of businesses, and I suppose it's first of all understanding what they are looking for ideally, to improve their business. Um, is that what sort of skill set, what sort of geography, um, they're looking for? I mean, I was working, about a year ago for a Middle Eastern business who specialized in financial technology, and they were very specific in their needs. They wanted, because London is such a strong financial hub, they wanted to find a digital agency in London that specialized in the financial services industry. So that was quite a clear brief on looking for those sorts of businesses. So we got our research team to look at those, and we interviewed the various potential sellers of their businesses, about their capabilities, about their performance, um, financial performance, whether they were sort of willing sellers, because not always, you don't always get willing sellers. Some people talk to you, but they're not sort of willing sellers. And 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 we met them first. We get some information on their business, talk to our client about that, and then we introduce them to our client, and they will also take those tests of chemistry, culture, and business proposition to see if that's a good deal.
Yeah, I would imagine, and I'm just going to throw this out there, that most of these types of businesses that are people led are often the owner, founder, manager. I mean, that's sort of often one or two, three people, and they are the core skill set. And then they would have, and I mean, I call this the chief many warriors concept of running a business.
Yeah.
And often they don't necessarily have this layer of management in place. So
Yeah.
if you take the main one or two, three people out, all of a sudden you've just got lots of helpers and no chiefs.
Yeah.
There's nothing. So that dynamic is I think probably an Achilles heel for a lot of people based business.
Yeah, it can be. Absolutely. And I think it's one of the top Achilles heel that makes selling a business quite difficult in our industry. But that's one of the things we bring out, um, earlier on. In if we do a strategic view of the business, we definitely encourage sellers of businesses to have a second tier management team, to start to develop a second tier management team. And very often, that can be done taking people that you already have in the business and giving them more responsibility, rather than, probably the hardest thing in the world to go and do is actually go and do a senior level hire. I've probably seen more disasters where people do that. They sort of bring someone in who's an industry heavyweight from somewhere else in the industry, and it just doesn't work. It's I'd say it's one of these processes that's more of a longer term process. And, and increasingly, you're getting books about business, and that's what they're encouraging people to do. They're saying, if you want to sell your business, if you want to be successful, you've got to start working on the business rather than in it. And I think it's a fairly good mantra. We had a deal, probably 6 to 9 months ago, a social media business run by a lady called Jodie Cook. And it wasn't a huge business, but she was a very determined lady. And she made it her intention to sell the business, and she didn't want an earn out. She wanted a straight deal, and she wanted to leave, which is extremely unusual in our industry. And diligently, she was able to um, uh, develop a second tier management team, a really competent second tier management team. And all the processes in the business were written down very, very clearly by, everybody wrote down the way everything worked. So basically it was a complete, the book was, they had the manual for the business, and that business was in fact, and I think there's a link on my website to a talk given by Jodie Cook on how she managed to sell her a business without an earnout, which she succeeded in doing, which was quite impressive.
It's highly unusual, and that's why I thought let's wait a bit before we go into the earnout concept, because
Yeah.
people-based business is all about making sure you hold on to the people post acquisition. And because
Yeah.
I mean, the show is about post acquisition or post merger integration. So this is where I want to get that sort of segue. Now we've spoken a lot about the sort of that preparing and doing negotiations and the culture and all that.
Yeah.
But deal structure surely has a massive impact in the
Yeah.
integration side of things. So that the way
Yes,
that
it
the
does.
deal has been structured, maybe share some of your thoughts around the dynamic between the deal structure and then what happens post deal and that whole integration process, and how much involvement you have in that.
Yes, certainly. Well, I mean, earnouts are very popular in the industry. They always have been, and they're a way to transition, um, one business into another. The interesting thing about earnouts that not everybody knows is that businesses are legally ring fenced when the earnout takes place. So if you sell your business to, WPP or a buyer, they will, you will work in your business for a 2-year earnout period, and there's nothing they can do to, without your permission, to affect your business. So they can't give you staff that you don't want. They can't get you to work on clients that you might not want. So the earnout is not a hugely popular way of doing deals. And as I say, it's not the best way to integrate a business, because if it's a profit earnout, that is, because really the business is sort of in limbo for 2 years until the earnout's over. And then you've got the danger of the founder leaving, and that the integration not being a success. So there's a trend to try and either limit the earnout to the top line of the business. So people will say, well, what we'll do is we'll incentivize you on your revenue line rather than your profit line, which at least enables the buyer to integrate the business as far as accounting and HR and all of the other synergistic benefits and property and all of those things, which makes it easier. So that's often a good move. Or sometimes now, again, increasingly, buyers are saying, well, what we'll do is we'll give you 60% of your current value in cash, and we'll give you 40%, sometimes less, of our shares. So it's a cash and shares deal. And that way they can start integrating the business straight away. So you haven't got this divisive earnout that's going on. And I've seen that, be quite successful. It can be a bit of a risk for buyers to take equity that they don't know too much about, but it's just a question of, it's one of those things you have to look at it and value it on each individual case. But where we've done that, I had several businesses, and they've often made much more money on the sale of the final 40%, sometimes twice, 3 times as much as they got for the original 60%, which is, so it can be quite lucrative.
Yeah, and I'm in total agreement, because with that concept of top line focus as opposed to bottom line focus. Bottom line focus means that you have to have joint decisions in terms of how you're changing the expense structure and the overhead structure and any things. I mean, there might be a big need to add additional marketing budget to increase the customer base. But whoever the seller was or is, would say, no, I'm not prepared to take a hit on my 2-year earnout.
Yeah,
But the business needs it, but now you're in conflict. And if you're just on the top line, then that could even be encouraging them to have more expense on marketing to generate more customers.
yeah,
So
that's right.
vice versa. So I suppose that's definitely a better a model. But the earnout is quite key. The other thing that I'm seeing that's busy happening, and maybe you could just share what's happening in your space, is this new concept of having multiple exits. In other words, a seller will build a business to a certain level, exit a portion of it, but hold on to a certain number of shares. Again, joining the other entity or going whatever the strategic direction is, building that, whatever's left over in terms of shareholding, building that value up again, exiting again, but again,
Yeah,
holding on to a percentage. But every time, let's call it the pie is getting bigger, but you own less and less of it.
yeah,
But every time you have another exit, and that's taking more and more money off the table. And this is a concept that I'm not seeing enough of, I don't believe, which I think would be very valuable for owners to stop sorry, thinking about the only big asset they own besides their homes and that, or properties or whatever their portfolio is, but their only big asset in life is that one business, and it's a single sale. And it's almost like to start thinking about, how can I harness or leverage this particular asset that I've built up to a certain point? I maybe can't take it any further. I've probably hit a ceiling. Do I plateau and sit there for the next 20 years? I sometimes call it sort of 1 year experience repeated 20 times. You have that kind of concept where rather build, go 3, 5 years, whatever it is, reach your limit, know what your limit is as a seller, and then say, okay, how do I get myself ready, not just for exit, but how do I get myself ready to be integrated into the next business at exit? And it's maybe just one question further that's not being asked. So from an integration or a post acquisition or post merger integration point of view, I would love to see more sellers say, no, I want to exit, but I want to be part of the new organization, and I'm actually integration ready, not
yeah,
just ready for sale.
yeah, absolutely. No, and I think I agree with you, Dudley. I think that's a really good way of doing deals, and we've done several like that. And I think the area where you do that, I think in our industry, it's really important not to leave it. And for any business, it's really important not to leave it too late to sell, because if you leave it too late, then you are looking for your exit and you have to sell the whole thing. But but it can be highly lucrative for the seller and the buyer, really, to sell chunks. Buyers normally want 51% as a going in position. So, but if you really need those synergies, you can benefit from all of those synergies, and you keep 49%, which you'll sell at a later date. Sometimes that is when the buyer ultimately sells, that you'll cash in. And when we've done those sorts of deals in the past, we did one in the north of England recently, and it was very, very lucrative for the seller to do that. And what they did, they started off with quite a fairly smallish business, but that business, it was a sort of a strategic consulting business, and they were asked by their clients all the time, but you've done some great strategy work for us, but we need you to also oversee the implementation and help us with the implementation. And they just didn't have the resources to do that. So they joined a bigger group that could do the implementation. They sold 51% of that, with the remainder to be sold when the buyer ultimately sold. And they did extremely well on that final 49%. And the nice thing about that, it's probably got an advantage over where you're having where you're taking the seller's equity, because always taking the seller's equity is a little bit of a risk. But by keeping 49% of your own equity means that you kind of know what it is. No, it's your business that you've built up. and therefore it's you're fairly safe with it.
Yeah, and what I'm starting to do, and I'm putting together a course, and this course is about post merger or post acquisition integration specialization,
Yeah,
taking the body of knowledge, if you like, and narrowing it down into an integration, but very focused on real life practical applications.
yeah,
I think where there's a big need, and probably it's for a lot of people, it's probably a blind spot in that, what can they be doing as business owners? And I think one of the key things they're already struggling with is that thing that you mentioned. I need to work on my business and not in my business. And then when it comes to I need to get out of my business, those are probably not, that's probably not the right question. It's how do I go to the next level? So it's not,
yeah,
I suppose scale up is a bit of a cliche these days. So uh, the term really is how do I go to the next level and keep growing my wealth and keep
yeah,
growing my revenue, and
yeah,
what's the best vehicle to get there? One of them is a partial exit, I think. But
yeah,
partial exit and entry into something else. But there's nothing available out there which will train people or even put the question out there to say you should be asking these questions of yourself and say, how do I get myself ready to go from, let's call it bootstrap startup entrepreneur to an entity that's turning 2, 3, 5, 10 million, to becoming part of an entity that's turning 100 million, to become part of an entity that's turning 500 million. You know,
yeah,
am I thinking like that as an entrepreneur, or am I just saying this is mine? I'm going to look after it. I'm going to it's that whole sort of scarcity mentality.
yeah,
It's
yeah. No, and that's
saying
it's
there's
definitely
bigger opportunities.
yeah, it's definitely a great way of doing it. You're creating, instead of an exit, you're really creating an exit strategy, and you're able to, it's going to help you build your business, which could be
Almost a
quite
wealth creation strategy.
it's huge.
All of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, you're definitely right. As I say, where I've seen it in practice, it's very, very powerful. And that's the sort of thing we address when we do the sort of strategic review of businesses. We look at what they need. And, if the owner's not ready to sell yet, or you might say, well, look, I want £10 million to retire. You say, right, well, maybe the answer is to find that the buyer, the actual business itself needs, some other skill set or something like that to help take it on to the next level. Then you find that what the answer to that is could be selling a smaller portion of the business, sell some of the business, not all of it. So yeah, that can work extremely well.
Yeah, and I suppose everyone's got their own motivations and everybody's got their own view, but it's also it's how much you know, and what you've been exposed to, and I've always been a big believer in sort of exposing yourself. I suppose it's the difference between those people that travel as opposed to those people that live in a village for their entire lives. They go to school, they work there, and that's where they are. They never travel anywhere. But as soon as you travel and you open up your mind to what's happening out in the real world, and or not real world, but in the broader world, I think the same thing happens with business owners. It's get exposed, understand that there are other ways of doing that thing, and there are probably better questions to be asking. And guys like yourself, and I think what's evident for me out of our conversation today is that that's basically what you do. What's very difficult, I think, from your point of view, especially if you're acting a lot of sales side, the danger is that you could be almost seen as if you're a broker, but you're nowhere near a business broker.
No, no, no.
Not even
People,
not even in the scope. Yeah, it's not
yeah,
even in
so it's frustrating for me to be called a broker, because you're absolutely right. Because I think a broker has probably only motivation is to sell the business. Whereas I guess we are two things. You know, one of the things is we are able to advise on the deal itself, but also we're able to give business advice. So every client we take on, we view as a business challenge, not as well as a corporate finance uh, client. It's a business challenge for us to help that client play on a bigger stage. Whereas and we want to make sure the business goes to the right home that helps them in the future. And so, yeah, a broker probably their motivation is to sell the business and get a commission, and that's kind of you just don't want to be labelled in that same place.
Yeah, look, everybody's got their space, but I think it's very clear to me your differentiator is strategic. It's probably having a fewer clients, but focusing more on the outcomes that they're looking to achieve,
Correct. Yeah.
and being more human and real about it than just a numbers game. And that's why I wanted you on the show today, because I think that comes out quite evidently for me. Having dealt in this space probably for 25, 30 years now, it's very clear when you get that sort of numbers game mentality. I might as well just push out a whole lot of information memoranda out there, and do the auction, sort of just throw it out there and hope someone will buy it.
Yeah.
You do a lot more of a focused type of engagement. You really look after your clients, and you do go a journey 1 or 2 years. I was quite surprised and very glad to hear that you do go 1, 2, 3 years to assist them. But
Yeah.
not only that is to put them in front of the right buyers, to get those negotiations going, and to think about what happens to them afterwards. So,
Yes.
so, so thank you for that.
Yeah. And as I say, they've got to have that outstanding proposition and the fit. Otherwise, the deal won't work. And we want our clients' deals to work. You know, we feel the pain. If anything ever goes wrong, we feel the pain ourselves too, which is probably slightly different to a brokerage type business. But yeah.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I was just going to we come into the end of the hour. We've got about 3 odd minutes left. And I thought maybe we just finish off on a little bit about the company, yourself, sort of how do you keep work-life balance, if there is such a thing,
Sure.
and where you're going with the business. Because if I look, you talk about being managing partner, founder and managing partner of the M&A Advisory. So clearly you've got a vision, you've got a purpose, and you've got sort of and I think you mentioned mantras earlier, but just tell us a little bit about you, where you're going, and how people can get a hold of you if they ever need to have a chat about the things that you offer.
Yeah, certainly. Well, in terms of what we offer, we've got our website, which is m&aadvisory.com. And my email address is davidb at m&aadvisory.com. All our details are on the website. So feel free if anybody would like a chat. We're very, very happy just to talk to people and see if we can offer, some general advice, point people in the right direction. So we'd certainly welcome calls. We're a central London-based firm. We are part of a wider network, which is an independent network, which gives us some global coverage. And we're based near St Catherine's Dock in E1. And there's a team of about 6 of us. We've been going about 11 or 12 years. Work-life balance, that's an interesting one. I think the probably thing that we have done, which is probably that might interest some your budding entrepreneurs out there, which is quite different. When I set the business up about 11 or so years ago, I had in mind, there was 2 things really. I had in mind the sort of the green issues, the planet saving type thing. And also the sort of, I'd worked in London and I remembered all the disruptions to business, the train strikes, the terrorist attacks and all of those things. So when I set the business up, I kind of had a rule in my mind at the time, which I said, I only want to employ people that can walk to work. So that's what we did. we basically, in London, there's a huge talent pool of people who live in London. They live in Canary Wharf, they live in Wapping, and places like around London. And we only advertise locally. We only recruited local people, and I think work-life balance, it's been fantastic. Because my number two, she's ex Morgan Stanley, and one of the reasons she needs to be local was she had to keep an eye on her mother, and my colleague Michelle's been with us, for the whole time, and I think commuting is a huge underrated strain on people. The stress of it all. It's easy when it goes well, but when it doesn't go so well, it's really really annoying. So I think that's and we're very lucky because it enabled us by social distancing in the office. Didn't have to use public transport. We were able to get through the pandemic and have our best year during COVID. So, maybe as a structure of businesses, maybe people might want to think about that, because that's, I think, in terms of work-life balance, that's one of the things as a business we've tried to encourage. It gets more and more difficult to always find people locally, but that's our principle.
Well, I mean, and you run a people business, don't you? And
Right.
that's
Yeah.
how we started. David, there's a question that's just popped up, and there are other comments in that, but there's a question I want to pose. I want to throw it to you, and then
Sure.
for my office hours, I'll continue the. I do office hours every Friday at 9 a.m. For all PMI, M&A type of questions, and also people running professional services businesses.
Yeah.
I'll also cover some of the answers on this question now, but specifically for yourself, it's by Ross Churchill. He says, "Thank you, Dudley and David, for the conversation on PMI, which is the post-merger integration. Are there dedicated internal systems that companies use to support the overall PMI strategy?" Can you think of anything like that? Can you share? Can you help Ross on your answer?
Yeah, I wish I could, Ross. I mean, we keep in touch with our clients on a regular basis. I think you'll probably find the bigger buyers have very, very bespoke systems. I mean, it's really important to have strong post-merger integration skills as a company, M&A skills and post-merger skills, because it makes a huge difference to every acquisition that you make. Now, if there's any bespoke software, I don't know. A lot of companies will keep that sort of skill set, and if they've developed any technology to do that, probably in-house. And I don't know of any generic software that fulfills that purpose. But it's a very interesting question, and it's probably there's probably some and an excellent business proposition for somebody to go and create such a thing.
Mm. Yeah, absolutely. I think
you feel, Dudley. Do you know of any? I don't, as I say, but I know that the skill sets needed are, really important.
Yeah. So we've actually got blueprints and models. And one of the things, I'm actually kickstarting a brand new training course. It'll be live and free for everyone, starting this Friday at 11 a.m., where I start rolling out and talking about these internal systems and blueprints and processes and even things that are people related. Again, it's about people, but how to address culture around internal systems that companies use to support their overall PMI strategies. And it's what you do before, during, and after. It's when do you start your building up your PMI, your strategy? What do you use? Is it appropriate for the type of industry? And then there's other things like communication and other strategies. HR, what can you do in terms of day one planning, in terms of after post acquisition? What can you do in the first 100 odd days? And that's why this podcast is 100 days and beyond.
Yeah.
And then going forward, what happens longer term? How quickly do you want to integrate? How important is that integration? How important is that integration speed to you? Are you a private equity, or do you need a quick exit? Do you buy, build, and exit? Is bundling important to you? In other words, putting multiple entities together to build up a high turnover and high EBITDA numbers, because you obviously get higher multiples. So PMI strategy is massively complex, and this course will be running weekly, every single week for the next year. So it's at least 50 modules in my PMI course of an hour long each. So I'm going to be sharing a lot of that stuff. And Ross, you're welcome to join on Friday. But yes, there's a ton of stuff out there. But David, thank you very much for that.
Just on, the HR that you mentioned, one of the things that we've used in the past in terms of, you mentioned people, is there's some software by a company called Thomas International that does HR. It's evaluating sort of skill sets, and it's very good for, you could you evaluate individuals, and you can also evaluate management teams in terms of it's basically like DISC analysis, drive, influence, steadiness, and compliance, and that's especially in the agency world, especially in people businesses, that can be quite powerful. And I could see that being, used by an acquiring company in post-merger integration. So it's one example.
Yeah, I mean, people use Colby. I'm not sure if you heard of Colby. They use the Clifton Strengths Finder, where there's more of a focus on people's strengths as opposed to their weaknesses. It's also building the correct sort of management structures that are appropriate. Not, a lot of management structures could be legacy structures that this is the way we've always done it. I think you mentioned that earlier on. This is the way we do it around here, that we don't do it any other way. How do you start changing that? I mean, PMI, in my mind, a lot of it is to do with change management. I've been fortunate enough to be part of sort of one of the big Unilever projects, especially HR, they'd moved the entire HR across to, this was years ago, to PwC. Now they've unwound that lots again. But there's a ton of things that happen in the PMI space. But like I said, I'm going to be putting out some proper training course around that. We do have office hours every Friday morning at 9 a.m., 11 until 12 every Friday. We go through it's proper theory. Okay. It's theory, it's examples. It's like a proper training course, and it's going to be going on for the next year, at least 50 hours worth of training. You're welcome to join there, Ross, if you want. But David, coming back to you, I just want to say absolutely brilliant. Thank you very much. It's been an amazing conversation from someone that we haven't had quite this type of profile person on our show before. And I want to thank you for sharing all your thoughts and ideas and your philosophy. And also, you're quite an established company, 10, 11 years. You're founder, owner, you run a people business. You help sell people businesses. You understand it quite deeply. And I certainly hope that people out there realize that. And if they do want to sell their business, that they know who to come and talk to. So that's great. David, any last thoughts, last few golden nuggets, a few things you want to share?
No, I think the only thing, that's on this subject is about post-merger integration. And I think the whole, I think the thing there that to take from this from me is that if you get the deal right pre-merger, the post-merger will be a lot easier. I say post-merger is very important as well, but focus on getting the pre-merger stuff right. Get the chemistry, the culture, the business proposition right, and all will follow.
Yeah, it's what's the carpenter's law, isn't it? They say measure twice, cut once.
Something like that, for sure. For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
David, thank you. Has absolutely wonderful to have you on the show. And we live stream, which you'll see all over in all different social outlets or platforms, as they call it. In the next few weeks, your podcast will be live on our podcast channel, 100 Days and Beyond. Anybody interested, please go to 100daysandbeyond.com. You'll find that there's a website there, a bunch of episodes already loaded. We're progressively loading a whole lot more. I think we've done 30 odd episodes already. And we try and do at least 1, 2, or 3 episodes a week at this stage. So please join us. Whoever's joined us today, join us again on the next one. Thank you, David.
Thank you very much. Well, it's been a real pleasure to meet you, and thanks everybody for listening. Much appreciated. And get in touch. Feel free to get in touch. All the best to you. Bye-bye.
David, stay on the line, and I just want to say goodbye. Thank you. Just stay on the line. All right. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us for another episode of 100 Days and Beyond, the podcast that focuses on the ins and outs and the roundabouts of the world of post-merger integrations or post-acquisition integrations, which is a complex world. It's a world that is fascinating as well as daunting. It is one where you learn massive amounts about yourself, about people, and about the way the world works. And I think it's an area that's I still think untapped, and I still think that there's a lot more we can do to be helping people out there get more value out of their businesses, get more value out of their hard work and effort, because we spend a third at least of our lives at work and building businesses and growing and developing in our careers. We might as well do it and do it well. Thank you very much. Thanks for joining me, and look forward to seeing you or listening to you, that you listen to me on the next podcast or episode. Thank you very much, and all the best.
Hi everybody, this is Dudley again, and if you need help with a future or existing post-merger integration, I want to invite you to arrange a free, no obligation meeting with us. During the meeting, we'll find out exactly what you need, what your challenges are, and we'll explain how our unique PMI slipstream method can help you. Simply call us or visit mergerintegration.co.uk. That's mergerintegration.co.uk, or come to our website, skillfulpursuit.com.